I'm glad that you can attend my talk. I will talk about, and thanks for the introduction. I will talk about interdependent privacy and mostly in third-party apps, but also talk a little bit about other application areas. And
probably just speak up here.
okay. And well, I plan to do this talk. So what is this guy doing here and where is it from?
Want to minimize the notes?
Yeah. Okay. Which Ming partially did, but I will talk a little bit about the university and my research lab because you guys have zero idea where I'm from. And then I will introduce interdependent privacy, try to define it, and then see what past research have been done in the context of interdependent privacy with regard to third-party applications, but also with regard to other application areas. Then I'll talk a little bit about the current research that we are doing in my group about interdependent privacy, and then I will just outline a few future topics that could be interesting, maybe for researchers to keep working on. So this is my university, Budapest University of Technology and Economics, and Mingan said it's one of the oldest in the world. It's one of the oldest technical university in the world. I have to a bit rephrase it. So sometimes they say it's the fourth oldest, sometimes it says it's the fifth, sixth, or seventh, but somewhere there. It was established in 1782 as a hydroengineering school back then. And I mean, it's like a textbook technical university. You have schools for different engineering, branches like mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, and so forth. And it is regarded as super big in Hungary, but compared to University of Michigan, it's not that big. Of course, there are like 14,000 students. And we have a school of electrical engineering and computer science, which is the largest. Actually, it's the largest school in Hungary, and also the strongest in getting external funding, which is usually, national grants and European grants, sometimes even some U.S. grants. For example, our group got a grant from the Office of Naval Research back a couple of years ago, which is quite unusual. The research lab I'm part of is called the CRISIS Lab, Laboratory of Cryptography and System Security. Does not do cryptography anymore, but the name stays. So it's headed by Professor Butyan, and it's a lab in the sense that we have 7 faculty members and 7 PhD students. So we have this kind of larger group, not a single professor, but multiple professors, and then like 50 undergrad and master students who are doing their thesis work with us. And the lab can be known for some things. One is discovering new malwares. Back in the 2010s, we were part of discovering new Stuxnet-like malware, and got into the news several times with that. And also we have a CTF team composed of our best students that made the finals of the DEF CON CDF several times. And also we have a couple of spin-off companies, and one of them is called Trezorit. You might heard about it. It's an end-to-end encrypted cloud storage solution that has been recently acquired by the Swiss Post. So and they keep working on their stuff, which was based on a bachelor thesis, actually. The research directions that we are pursuing is first, security and privacy in cyber physical systems, which is probably the largest research area that we are active in. And this concerns industrial control systems and also vehicles, Internet of Things devices and such. Another branch is security and privacy in federated learning and machine learning in general. And the third one is the economics of security and privacy, which I'm very much active in. I guess you kind of killed this slide again, so I don't have to talk about it again. But one thing I would like to highlight is that my original background is in computer networks and telecom networks. I used to work at Ericsson Research in a previous life, and through that I transitioned into data privacy and cybersecurity during my postdocs. And I also continue to use a little bit of economics in most of my research projects. And of course, as everyone here, I also have papers on COVID, machine learning, and also basketball. That's a specialty that I used to have. Okay. So let's go to interdependent privacy. So I'm not sure if the picture is visible, but it's a picture that probably the lady didn't want to share, but it got shared by someone else, and now she suffered this privacy loss and probably not very proud of this picture. So when I talk about interdependent privacy, the only incident that people can recall is usually Cambridge Analytica. Did everyone hear about Cambridge Analytica? Everyone is familiar with that? You are too young, maybe? Okay, so I mean, Cambridge Analytica was like the big event in the history of interdependent privacy in a sense, because for like, I don't know, 1 month, it was all over the news. Every news snippet was about Cambridge Analytica, and people try to understand like underlying causes and impacts and whatever. So I will talk about this a little bit later, but interdependent privacy is much more than just the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So when we talk about interdependent privacy, we say that an individual's privacy is for sure affected by other individuals' decisions. For sure, it depends on like service providers' decisions and stuff like that, but also by decisions of other people. In the sense, it's a bit similar to interdependent security, with the caveat that the interdependent security can actually be good for you. You can get a positive externality from someone else securing their systems. In interdependent privacy, you can only lose. So it's a bit special in this case. The underlying root causes can be several. So one is that what happened in Cambridge Analytica, that one of your friends directly shared your data with a third party. That's quite clean. The second thing is that there are some data objects that are inherently multi-party. For example, the picture that I showed before. So it does not belong to a single data subject. It actually belongs to multiple data subjects. So if someone shares that, then inherently there is like a tension and a possibility for an interdependent privacy issue there. You know, photos, audios, videos, and this kind of data objects. The third thing, which is a bit different, is data correlation, and this usually comes up with within the context of genomic data. So if I use one of these online genome sequencing services like 23andMe or Ancestry or whatever else, and your genome is mapped and it's put online, public maybe, then because your relatives' DNA is quite much correlated with your DNA, they suffer potentially a privacy loss. For example, they can tell, with a probability of 90% whether they are, likely to have Parkinson's disease, for example, based on your genome. So in terms of medical implications, this could be huge, and there is like a separate area, genomic privacy, that deals with this thing.
Wait, they caught a lot of criminals that way too.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. So can be construed as positive or negative.
Yeah, I mean there are different consequences, but the phenomenon behind it is interdependent privacy in this case. And so this interdependent privacy has a lot of different aspects. There are technical aspects, like what kind of permissions you build into your application platform that allows access to different types of data. And there are then social economic aspects, like, for example, what type of externalities can it cause, and who will pay for those externalities. And then, of course, there are legal aspects. Data protection regulation should also deal with this, and we'll see that doesn't exactly deal with this, at least not the European one. And of course, there are ethical and other aspects as usual with privacy problems. So the issue in the interdependent privacy, usually when we talk about the direct sharing of someone else's data, is that that person doesn't know about this. And so they cannot control this, this sharing process, which is sharing their own data, okay? So this is actually an externality, a negative externality, because someone else is sharing your data without, you didn't choose to share the data, you just suffer the consequences. And it's like a textbook negative externality, an uncompensated side effect. And this creates interdependent privacy. And I already told you that it's a special type of privacy loss. So normally when you give away your privacy, you gain something, right? You let, I don't know, some cookies in and you get personalized recommendations, or you get free service, for example, from Google. But in this case, you don't get anything. You lose your privacy, you suffer a privacy loss, but you don't gain anything. So it's a net negative. The solution to externalities from the economic literature is you have to internalize them. Okay, if they are part of the system, if they are internalized, they cease to exist, and then you might end up with a more efficient system. So one way to do is to tax the stakeholder that causes the externalities. This is called a Pigouvian tax in economics. And I mean, the most basic example is the carbon emissions tax, for example. So if you cause pollution, then you have to reimburse people that suffer from the pollution. Okay, but if you recall Cambridge Analytica, for example, it's not quite clear who causes the externality. Is it Facebook? Is it the Cambridge Analytica company? Is it your friend who is sharing your data? So sometimes it's not that easy to actually internalize externalities through a tax, especially in digital systems. Another way to handle the externalities is some kind of regulation, of course. For example, you can limit the activity that kind of causes this negative externality. Usually they say that GDPR, the European Data Protection Regulation, is successful in some sense. It's not as successful in regulating interdependent privacy because it plainly does not talk about interdependent privacy. It does not acknowledge interdependent privacy. So it's kind of like a gray area. You can argue that it's a privacy breach. You can also argue that it does not constitute a privacy breach based on the GDPR. And by the way, of course, regulation is kind of like a slow way to deal with externalities, and also like text is up for interpretation. So this might not be a solution for this problem. And the third thing that usually computer scientists or engineers like to do is to design or redesign a system in a way that those externalities just go away. For example, you design a system where the knowledge of your data being shared or the control of the sharing process is inherently integrated. Okay, if this is true, every time your data is shared, you get a pop-up window, whether you allow it or not, even if you were not the one to share it, then this externality goes away. But sometimes this is not very usable. Okay, it's not very comfortable to do so.
Vijay has a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mingyan. Yeah. So the other thing in economics that you would have, which I mean, it's sort of inherently related to this. You mentioned it earlier. Is a notion of property rights, right? And maybe for these type of things, the property right is not well defined. So, or the mechanisms to exercise your property right is not well defined.
Yeah, it's also a way to do it. But for example, if you have a multi-party data object, then what do you do?
So there too, there are shared property rights for, it doesn't always work out, but there are schemes by which they talk about property rights. But yes, I'm not saying it solves everything, but for different problems, we may have to think of it differently. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for that addition. So when we talk about the system redesign, then we can take a look at what Facebook did, for example, after Cambridge Analytica. What they did, they changed the permissions and their API that accesses the personal data, and they eliminated the opportunity for interdependent privacy. Actually, they just gutted the API. They removed a lot of permissions. But what happens when you don't have incentives to do that? It's only the platform owner, the app platform owner in this case, who can actually do this redesign. You as a researcher, you can't do this. You are not running Facebook, right? Yeah.
Not everything is through API, right? So I can still post a picture of
Sure.
permanently for this
Yeah.
on any social network.
Yeah, those things, of course, they don't go away. This is only for an example for third-party application where the permission system was changed and kind of solved the problem for that given instance. But sometimes there are no incentives for most of the times, there are no incentives for the platform owner to actually do this, right? Because Facebook wants as much data flowing through their platform as possible. So they want apps. And so they want apps to carry a lot of data. So they are not aligned with these incentives of being restricted. So I'm talking about third-party apps because those are the so-called veterinarian horse. That's not an English expression, but I will talk a little bit about it, of interdependent privacy. So the veterinarian horse is like the negative poster child. Okay, that's how I can. So third-party apps actually exhibit all the problems related to interdependent privacy. This is a Hungarian term, but that exists in Hungarian, but not really can be translated into English. So it's used to be that the vets, when they were training vets in a university, they just showed a horse that had like 55 different diseases, showing all kinds of problems with their mouth, with their legs, with their body. And so they could demonstrate a lot of different illnesses on the same subject. And this is true also for third-party apps in the context of interdependent privacy. Okay, so in the past, what happened in research related to interdependent privacy? So actually, the first paper that is considered a privacy research paper in 1890 was about interdependent privacy. Okay, this was about this was when instant photography was actually developed, and then people gathered for social events, and then there came paparazzi and took pictures of them. So this is like the beginning of the tabloid era. And actually, this paper is about the right to privacy through this actual event of paparazzi snapping photos of people who didn't want to be photographed. So in 100 years later, when the internet and the web came along, then online privacy research started, but they were focusing on how the own action of individuals using these new technologies will result in privacy loss or not. And it was not until 2006, with the advent of online social networks and such, where researchers actually started to look into the impact of others' action on privacy. And by others, I mean other users of technology. And there were like two different directions there. One was photo sharing, obviously, you also mentioned it. It's like it's a textbook example for multi-party data and therefore interdependent privacy. And also how you can infer the personal attributes of someone through the attributes of their friends. through homophily and these kind of things. So these were the two research directions back then. But in 2011, Dana Boyd actually started to talk about networked privacy. And there is this citation, there's this quote from her work where she said that privacy isn't about the individual's relationship to information, it's about more or less the individual's relations to each other and information. And this was defined in the context of teenagers' social life and their life on social networks. And the definition when we kind of created the term interdependent privacy was coming from our own paper in 2013, when we said the privacy of individual users is bound to be affected by the decisions of others. So this was the first time when this was kind of defined in a more exact way and in a technical system. And the use case was the app platform of Facebook. Now, after this, there were several research works dealing with different contexts and data types. So social network data, but also genomic privacy. Kin genomic privacy is what I just told you about before. Also about location data, like how you can cause privacy loss to your friends by sharing co-location data, for example. And then also Google Cloud Apps and also multimedia, when the multi-party data objects cause interdependent privacy. Also, there have been some game theoretical works on studying the misaligned incentives in interdependent privacy scenarios among users and between users and platform. One was our own work with third-party apps on Facebook, but also with regard to genomics and co-location. Others have studied these problems. Also was a new strand of research in behavioral economics, where people studied so-called other regarding preferences, like how much people care about others' welfare. And they try to quantify how much users value others' privacy. And basically the takeaway, and multiple papers about this, but the takeaway was that they don't value it zero, but they don't value it as highly as their own privacy. And then 2018, Cambridge Analytica happened, and it kind of like exploded this research scene. And I will talk about that after this. But we can say that by 2020, interdependent privacy has become its own niche. In privacy, there was a survey paper that collected around 100 papers that dealt primarily with interdependent privacy. The takeaway from the survey was that there are many, well, not many, but multiple isolated research communities in behavioral economics, in technical privacy, in information systems, in human-computer interaction that even define the terminology differently, but actually they talk about the same things. So this was a step towards kind of uniting the research community. But we could say that pre-2020, ad hoc methodologies were used, and also the game theoretical models that were developed, they were very specific. So you couldn't really use them to generalize to other interdependent privacy problems. Okay, so Cambridge Analytica was the incident for interdependent privacy. Just like a quick overview. So there was this researcher in Cambridge University who created an app, and they recruited 270,000 users. It's a Facebook app, okay, a third-party app on Facebook. They recruited 270,000 users, paid through Amazon Mechanical Turk, okay, and implemented as a Facebook app, and collected their data and their friends' data through the permissions that Facebook actually offered in their API. And through these 270,000 users who actually consented into sharing their data, they reached 87 million profiles. And then they used these profiles to actually characterize people through this psychometric model, when you can actually determine, you can quantify a person's personality through only like 5 numbers, five tuple. And if you can do that, you can do it through their Facebook likes. And if you have enough likes from a person, you can make a very good psychometric model based on which you can actually show personalized ads and try to influence their behavior. And of course, the big hit here was that the 2016 US presidential elections had an influence from this work. They persuaded some voters, allegedly, they persuaded some voters to vote for this and that, or to stay home. And this also happened with the Brexit vote in the UK. It also happened in Kenyan parliamentary elections and an undisclosed Eastern European country. When I heard about this, I was really curious whether it's Hungary or not, but turned out it was not Hungary. But I won't tell you which country it was, because it's just an alleged impact. No, actually no. Okay, it was Poland, but you didn't hear it from me.
Be my next guest.
And so a lot of investigations and lawsuits followed, and finally they concluded that the data transfer that came from the company of this researcher to another company that actually worked on influencing elections, that was violating Facebook's terms of use. So Facebook washed their hands in this sense. But under the hood, the API for accessing Facebook data for third-party apps was explicitly designed in a way that you can scrape information from the user's friends without their consent and without their knowledge. So in like the first version of the API, there were several permissions, one permission per profile attribute for the friend's data, friend's name, friend's birthday, friend's location, and so forth and so on. And for example, there was also a permission called read mailbox. So if you can access a person's mailbox, inherently, there will be data that belongs to that person and someone else. So it's creating interdependent privacy problems right off the bat. And so Facebook looked into this data collection from this researcher called Kogan in 2013 and 14. Remember, the Cambridge Analytica case is in 2018. So they looked into it and they changed their API in 2014. And then they say that this change actually solved the problem. So by version 2.0, they just eliminated the interdependent privacy issues with the third-party apps. Yeah, this is where I have an animation, but doesn't matter. We looked into this. There is this Facebook API Explorer, used to be a tool where you can actually check if you develop a Facebook app, like you can check what your queries will return, what kind of data you will access to. And we used the 2.3 version of the Facebook API, so a long time after 2.0, which solved the problem, and you could actually scrape friends' data still. And then we had a discussion with Facebook, and we asked, like, why are we seeing this? And then they say, no, it's the same for all kind of 2.x versions of the API. The friend must have installed the same application. And for friends who installed the same application and gave their consent for their own data to be shared, it's okay. But of course, we designed the experiment in a way that the friend did not install the app. And it was still possible to get those data. Interestingly, version 2.4 fixed this. So when we changed this version to 2.4, you had no longer access to the friends data through third-party apps. Okay, let's skip this. So we wanted to quantify and characterize this collateral damage, termed it collateral damage, that Facebook apps can cause through having access to friends data without their consent. And what we found is that based on this, there is a data set called App Inspect. It's a large data set on all the possible Facebook apps from 2013, that the probability for your data to be included in the Cambridge Analytica type of situation, so that your data is shared without your consent and knowledge, if you have a popular app, it's larger than 80%. Okay, for a single very popular app with 500 million users. And on average, such an app would actually get around 2 attributes from you if you are involved in such a data stream. And then we also found it, well, not legal, because there is a lack of transparency and there is a lack of informed consent in this case, even though such a situation is not completely characterized in, for example, in the European data regulation. And we also ran a user survey, and we found that a large majority of people are concerned about getting their data scraped without notification and consent. Okay. Yeah, we had our 50 minutes of fame because of this all over the Wired and NBC News and Atlantic and stuff like that, because people were actually interested in interdependent privacy for the first time because of the Cambridge Analytica debacle. So in the present, yeah.
But so there's interdependent privacy because there are third parties, but Facebook has all that stuff that violates privacy too. So whatever Cambridge Analytica did, you could have bought from Facebook by targeting ads, right?
You could both, well.
So you can just go to the Facebook platform, pay them money, and those ads will be seen by the people that Cambridge Analytica targeted for. Is that not what happened?
Well, Facebook, in their terms of usage, they don't condone profiling people and using this profiling. Of course, Facebook has this data.
Pay them, and then if you pay them, you could use those attributes to actually target ads. I think that's something they changed later, but
they changed
the attributes. But the only thing that happened here is that somebody else made money compared to Facebook.
You can view it that way as well. Yeah, sure. I mean, Facebook certainly have all this data. What they didn't do was what they claimed they didn't do was doing this psychometric profiling thing.
But I think I could have done the psychometric profiling just by putting those terms into the ad targeting machine. I do the profiling, do the ads, of course. And you just pay Facebook to do that for you. So it's interdependent, but it's multiple level interdependent. I guess you're worried about the apps and people, third parties harvesting it through the platform, but
I'm also worried about Facebook. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. So because Facebook has access to all this data, could have been done through Facebook, but it was not claimed not to be done.
So I think that your point is how Cambridge Analytica did it was kind of irrelevant because they could have just gone the direct route and just got hold of the data. And even if all they could get was people who have actually signed away their data because of the correlation, they could have done something very similar, right?
right. It's almost like the same problem that got exposed through the APIs with Cambridge Analytica. It's a problem within an organization where people don't actually silo information, even though they might or should. Though they probably no rules, especially not in the US, but at least in Europe, there are certain rules around siloing information, not keeping it, not correlating it.
Yeah, it's quite strict. Yeah.
The challenge is how you silo it, right? Because
if you have correlation, then yeah.
Each other.
Well, I think it's actually really easy. It's just, I think it goes back to that previous point that there's no incentive to do so. And yeah. I mean, it's, companies do maintain partitions, banks famously
Sure.
supposed to maintain that partition. If they don't, they get sued. Or
I suppose, yeah, so if we have a group photo, then you generate n copies and in each one, only your face is shown and everybody else is blurred, right? I guess
right.
Yeah.
it must be
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, but yeah.
But yeah,
a part of the incentives could come from regulation. So GDPR created some incentives for taking data protection seriously because they have fines if you don't do that. And for example, Facebook was hit with big fines, but big fines are not that big for Facebook. They made more money. So regulation is one part, but it cannot really solve everything.
I agree, lack of incentive is big, but of course, the lack of incentive is directly tied to their business model.
Yeah.
And so that's just
So you cannot
kind of an impossibility.
really expect a company that's based on data sharing not to share data, right? So
right.
Vijay has another.
yeah. Go ahead, Vijay.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I guess I also had a related comment was essentially all of today's machine learning or AI-based thing depends on data. And there are correlations and so wouldn't the whole system sort of break down if you have extreme restrictions? I'm just saying there's a trade-off between privacy and efficiency of any of these algorithms.
Yeah, completely true. So the emergence of machine learning on such a scale that it's emerged now is of course, making everything even harder to protect in this sense. So, but in the last decade, actually, the research started in interdependent privacy started to focus on new technologies, such as like voice assistants and like augmented reality, even large language models and anonymous messaging, for example. And there is a new notion that, not super new, but new in this research direction of bystander privacy, especially with regard to smart homes and like voice assistants and such. That is quite prominent now, which is actually, if you think about it, it's like a subcase of interdependent privacy in a sense. So you go into someone else's home and their voice assistant records your audio and maybe transmits it back to Amazon, Google, whatever, or a third-party app that's actually installed on their application platform without your consent, obviously. So that's like a similar situation. Yeah, but this is like a prominent direction now. People are interested in smart homes because they are, proliferating and stuff like that.
So under this terminology, who's the bystander? It's the house guest? Is
Yes.
the bystander?
Yes. A bystander in terms of externality, suffering externality. So
next time I have a dinner party, I need everybody to sign a waiver.
yeah, you should put a huge sticker on your door that Alexa is listening or something.
By the way, in the UK, they post those on many squares have these disclaimers in the UK because actually it turns out in London, a lot of them are private squares. So it's private property. People think it's actually a public property. So then they have CCTVs.
All kinds of surveillance.
They have these little signs that say that, hey, we have the right to monitor.
Yeah, it's probably at knee height and behind some column or something like that.
Well, they're just very small.
Yeah.
And here on the street may be public, but if the front door is closed enough, their webcam, their camera can
Right.
Oh yeah.
can capture coming to the door.
Yeah, so like the researchers started to focus on these new technologies and they kind of got away from studying third-party apps. But the point I want to make here, even without the animation, is that third-party apps are still worth of focusing on. Why? Because we use them all the time. And we had this hunch that interdependent privacy is present at all application platforms that have third-party apps. And so what we did is that we collected app data from different platforms, and we take third-party apps, the definition of third-party apps quite broadly. So we also consider, for example, browser extensions and mobile apps and Google Workspace enterprise apps, and also Zoom Marketplace, which was a new addition. I was first I was kind of surprised that there is such a thing, but there is such a thing with 1,000 apps, and then studied the permission structure of the platforms, and also studied which permissions those apps that are actually available in an app store request. And yeah, there will be a problem with not having the animation, but let me solve it. So first we found that in all the application platforms, there are permissions which with term IDP or PIDP, which are for sure creating interdependent privacy issue. For example, sharing a contact list or your address book that creates interdependent privacy by definition, or PIDP, potentially IDP, which would be, for example, sharing a photo or sharing an audio or make a recording and stuff like that. So these type of permissions exist on all platforms, and you can see that in certain platforms, for example, in Google Workplace, which essentially is a collaboration platform, of course, most of the permissions will have IDP connotations. So for example, on Google Workplace, there are 87 types of permissions through which you can have access to data, and 74 of them is somehow related to multiple data subjects. Because the objective of Google Workspace is to collaboratively work on documents, more or less, to simplify things. So these permissions are everywhere. And we also found that the actual ratio of apps available on these app platforms and requesting such permissions are very high. So for example, on Android, you have a total of, in the data set, we had more or less 10,000 apps. And out of those, 1,000 asked for permissions that are creating interdependent privacy by definition. And another 8,000 were asking for permissions that might create interdependent privacy problems through, multi-party data objects. And you can see the same numbers for all the other platforms. And finally,
is it significantly different on Apple, or?
We don't know, because we couldn't scrape.
I see.
We couldn't scrape Apple. So we tried to somehow get a data set, and there were some leads, but we didn't manage to. The expectation is that they are stricter about privacy, but we can't quantify that. So the last result here is that for example, on Android, a typical or an average application is requesting 11 permissions, and out of those 11 permissions, more than 4 permissions have IDP connotations. So we can conclude from all of these that interdependent privacy is inherently present in third-party apps because of the permission systems. And these permission systems are not going away. And the complete redesign with a completely different types of permissions is probably not practical. So we have to do something else about it if we are interested in interdependent privacy and try to protect users' data. The second reason why it's worthwhile to focus on third-party apps and interdependent privacy is because there is actually no technical mitigation mechanism, not even as a research prototype. So the IDP papers are more about measuring and analyzing and theorizing, but they don't really provide a kind of like a workable solution. What could be an alternative is to completely redesign the permission system. For example, Facebook can do that with their own permissions, but there are not many of us who own an app platform. So that might not be the right solution. And we also mentioned the lack of incentives to do so. So what we propose is a system called IDP filter, which is actually a platform agnostic filtering API. So it could be used for any type of third-party application. And a lot of time went into designing this system, and the design principles were proper incentives, first of all, and voluntary usage. You cannot make Facebook use some kind of research prototype to filter the data, right? But this was designed so that the app providers, the third-party app providers who care about privacy as a added value to use this filtering API voluntarily. And then other design principles, of course, usability. I mean, if you are a user of an app, you don't want to spend like 15 minutes to set your privacy settings and stuff like that. That just doesn't work. And also incremental deployment. So you have a working system of third-party apps. Billions of people are using it. So you cannot just shut them down and then make them use this filtering solution. So this is on top of today's existing infrastructure, and it can be configured with smart defaults, of course, and it also provides feedback to users. So if there is some filtering done, so it saves the users some privacy loss, then they will get a report about this, and kind of promote transparency through this. So the system looks from a bird's eye view something like this. So we have a setup phase or a setup for the filter, and then we do some filtering. Filtering is done based on the data modality that we have. So if we have textual data, then we do text filtering. If we have pictures, we have image filtering, and so on and so forth. And then there is a report generator based on the actual filtering that was done. And then the app shows the report inside its own UI to the user who actually installed the app. Now, the prototype that we have is, of course, limited. So we focus on text filtering because that's the easiest to at least implement in some way. And so we have this Python prototype, and the main idea behind the solution is the use of 3 lists that sets up the filter. And this is, I'm not shy to say that this is inspired by one of Facebook's dialogues. It was called Apps Others Use, which was meant to be control actually interdependent privacy. And we have 3 lists. One is a self-regarding blacklist, where I can actually prohibit other users to share my certain attributes that is shared with the app, but I don't want other users to share it with the app. There is a self-regarding whitelist where I can actually say I opt in to having other users share my attributes. Okay, they can share my birthday, for example, but I don't want to share my location. And then there is an other regarding blacklist where I can specify that I don't want to share others' information. Okay, so the self-regarding lists are about my own data attributes shared by others, allowing it or disallowing it. And the other regarding blacklist is only considering my own data flows, but sharing others' attributes. Okay. And of course, the whitelist has the highest priority. So if there is something in both of the lists, and the whitelist is going through. Anyway, we had some preliminary performance evaluation, and even with this being implemented in Python and without much optimization, performance seems to be scaling quite well. Of course, this kind of system has many limitations. One aspect is trust. You have to trust the filter now with all the information, right? So this can be mitigated in the sense that you can implement this as some kind of secure processing over encrypted data. Probably works with at least with textual data, or the different app platforms can actually implement this filter for their own applications. And of course, we only implemented text filtering for obvious reasons. No other modalities. And it's also true that simple text filtering cannot really remove all the privacy implications. You have a natural language, you have context, even if you remove like full sentences, the correlation inside the sentences might still cause privacy loss. But this is the first solution that offers technical mitigation. Okay. This is the last thing I want to talk about. Is it okay if I take a couple of more minutes? So the third thing that we are working on is threat modeling. So their providers, they have to conform to some data protection regulations, at least in Europe or in California or in Australia or in Canada. Or they might even care about privacy. You never know. And to be able to conform to those regulations, you have to do threat modeling. If you don't know the threats that emerge from your system, how would you mitigate them? Or how would you quantify them? You can't do that. You need to do threat modeling. And there is this, there are multiple standard tools for that, but probably the best known is called Linden, which is an acronym from 7 threat categories: linkability, identifiability, non-repudiation, detectability, disclosure of information, unawareness, and non-compliance. This is said to be a comprehensive categories for privacy threats. So any privacy threat that you can think of falls under one of those. And this is one of the pros of Linden. It's comprehensive, okay? It has a comprehensive catalog of threats. It can be broken down into threat trees. And it does have a structured workflow, so you actually go to their page, see which steps you have to follow to do threat modeling for your own software, for your own app, for your own system. But the cons are the same. It's comprehensive. There are like a huge catalog of privacy threats. Where should you start? How would you be sure that you mapped all the threats that are relevant to your system? It's actually very hard to do without you or someone else being a Linden expert. Not even a privacy expert, but an expert in this specific modeling tool. And another thing is that you cannot really focus on a type of privacy threat in terms of interdependent privacy. So we found that interdependent privacy threats are kind of orthogonal to these categories. There is an IDP issue that could result in linkability. There is an IDP issue that could result in detectability. There is another IDP issue that could result in non-compliance. So the usual categories of Linden that then at the end are used to produce these huge tables with certain parts of the system being threatened by different threats are not useful for interdependent privacy threats. And Linden is based on a data flow diagram model of the studied system, software, or application. And it does ignore, like normal DFDs, they does ignore the composition of the data flow, what's inside the data flow that we are modeling. And the idea here is that you need to enrich this model in order to actually find IDP threats. So if you can mark a data flow with a label IDP, then you have to think about specific IDP threats that you would otherwise not think about through using normal Linden and normal DFDs. And so the first step is to enrich the model with these data flow labels.
This is 3427?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, at least according to his calendar. I was just talking about.
Okay, I finish in 2 minutes. Okay. Okay, so the idea is to enrich the model and then add IDP specific threat categories, which are orthogonal to the ones that were there in Linden. And also identify the threat actor's role, because you need that to then propose a mitigation to that threat. If the threat actor is the government, then you need a different mitigation than if the threat actor is, for example, an uninformed user. And we do case studies for WeChat, Instagram, and Zoom, and show how you can actually find those interdependent privacy threats using this kind of extended model. And this is ongoing work. Okay. I just mentioned two potential topics for the future. One is privacy policy analysis. Surprisingly, there is a lot of research on privacy policies and you know how people don't read them and what they contain, but no one looked at it from an interdependent privacy angle. So that's like a low-hanging fruit to be kicked off potentially with Florian Schaub from the university. And then another thing that I actually thought of during my stay here is about a more general game theoretical model of platforms, providers, and users, ad providers and users, because essentially what we have here is a self-interested mechanism designer. And this was a new concept to me. Of course, it's not new in the literature. But when I was attending one of the PhD defenses, there was one paper about self-interested mechanism designers, and this is actually a very good fit for this interdependent privacy context. Okay, so conclusions. An individual's privacy is bound to be affected by others' actions because we have like this connected network environment. IDP does exist and it will stay here because it's inherently part of the system through the permissions that we have, and also through correlation of data, and also through multi-party data objects. So in the future, when you have a privacy problem and when you want to analyze something from a privacy perspective, you should keep in mind that IDP is probably a privacy threat that not many others will look for, but it is there and could cause problems, for example, Cambridge Analytica. And I have a list of resources at the end that when the presentation is shared, you can look up. It includes some of the paper, the survey paper, and also some presentations, videos on YouTube about the Cambridge Analytica case that I made at a conference. So thank you, and sorry for all the problems with Zoom and sharing. This is what it is. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Questions? Until the next thing starts, I think we can ask questions. Okay.
Yeah, so you have an API, you traverse this graph, you collect all this information, right? And in differentiating from privacy, one of the ways to sort of protect individual user data is by only allowing you to collect statistics, only allowing you to query statistics about the graph. And is that at all applicable in certain contexts for IDP?
So in the sense that if you collect statistics from a group of users, let's say average age or something like this, of course, average age contains your age and also contains the other person's age. So it's also, in a sense, a multi-party data record, in a sense. So when you talk about differential privacy, applying differential privacy for like statistics release, I think it's kind of orthogonal to what I was talking about. But I mean, they have overlaps. Yeah, but the thing is here, you share exact data through this API. So it's not about querying statistics. It's about knowing your birthday.
Right.
So when you have a birthday distorted with I don't know.
People decide what these APIs are, right? They're not.
Sure, yeah.
That's set in stone. So.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, but good question.
So what about data lineage? I mean, it seems like if you actually wanted to capture, you could focus on the use of the data, and at that point, somebody would have to prove the source of the data. Is anything going on in that space that might be relevant here?
Yeah, I mean, we were thinking about doing some kind of watermarking type of things to do this, but then did not follow through. Actually, I think I submitted a Google research proposal some years ago that was in that direction, but they didn't like it. So probably no sufficient incentives for that.
Right.
But it does make sense to consider it actually, because then it could be a way to mitigate or limit this kind of data sharing.
Right.
That's a good observation actually.
I think the regulation could be simpler then, because you essentially audit at the point of use of that data as opposed to the point of collection. And then you could actually uncover these things. Maybe.
Yeah, that's something to think about.
At the risk of one more minute, I want to ask, so
Yeah.
The idea behind the API, how would that apply, not the actual implementation? How would that apply to things like 23andMe?
A filtering API, you mean?
Yeah,
No way.
it doesn't know.
No, because that's not. No, this is meant for third-party apps.
Okay, good.
23andMe is a different kind of IDP problem because of data correlation. For that, I mean, you should ask consent from your relatives if you want to do a genome sequencing.
How do you even begin to approach that problem? If I'm willing to undergo, I mean, what kind of permission do I need to? It's
And
pretty far reaching.
yeah, and when do you stop? Like third cousins or so? Yeah, that's tricky. I mean,
I suppose, going back to what you're saying, there can be an option for me to say, this is only for large population, that's what I'm contributing to. You shall not use this to identify a relative.
Right. I mean,
That could be. Yeah.
some of the DNA testing sites, not 23andMe, but there are these other ones that give you, I forgot the name.
yeah, there are multiple ones.
But some of them explicitly say that, hey, you can upload your genome and it'll give you some analysis, and then they delete it, that they don't actually store it.
Yeah.
Or they collect certain types of information of it, and they're really upfront about, now whether they do it or not that way, I don't know, but they claim that they anonymize it. But yeah, you have to trust somebody, and they can.
Yeah, I mean, maybe actually I know that there are solutions for doing this in an encrypted manner. So you can do the analysis on an encrypted data. The provider never sees
Right.
the clear text. This can be done. Again, are there incentives for the providers?
Very, very expensive in terms of computation time.
Yeah, but there are existing solutions for that.
Well, thank you very much for staying. Let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys over Zoom.
You guys have a lecture?
We're supposed to have lab here. I don't, they didn't say an announcement. Probably might not have labs for.
Okay, well, this is your space now, and good luck. We
Yeah.
a seminar.
Yeah.